දවස් 30ක්ම unlimited Netflix බලන්න. unlimited data pack එකක් මුළු පවුලටම unlimited fun එකක් අරගන්න. අදම active කරගන්න.
ලෙන්ගතුකම වැඩි කරගන්න ලව්ජු රුපියල් 50ට අඩු කළා.
මාමේ එන්න අපිට එකක් බොමු.
Tonight, different kettle of fish. Study shows that the COVID-19 strain involved in the current wave is much worse than the previous one.
The lineage we found this time have a very high viral load as well as a high degree of transmissibility.
In the thick of it, Sri Lanka suffers 20th COVID-19 fatality.
We have to adapt to live with this COVID-19 infection.
GMOA calls for more power for district-level health officials. Ignorance. Errant Western Province residents who disregarded curfew to be quarantined.
They have been ordered to be quarantined at the places where they are staying at the moment.
No need for concern. State Minister Ajit Niwad Cabral upbeat about Sri Lanka's debt servicing capability. All that and much more coming up on First at 9 this Saturday the 31st of October 2020.
Nava Sunlight Sakura. Then Dikukal Pavatina Sakura Mal Suandin.
From AdaDerana, this is AdaDerana First at 9. Live from Studio 24 in Colombo.
Good evening and welcome to First at 9. I'm Dhammik Ekanaika. Let's start off by taking a look at the pandemic situation. Sri Lanka marked its 20th COVID-19 fatality today, 3 days after the country recorded its 19th. The deceased was a 54-year-old woman who was suffering from health complications brought on by diabetes. With the number of virus infections and the mortality rate on the rise, health authorities once more urge people to be on their best behavior to stave off any further spread of COVID-19. They also say that random testing was never abandoned and they will continue in the future as well.
A 54-year-old woman who was receiving treatment at Ward 47 of the Colombo National Hospital passed away yesterday. Her PCR test report returned this morning, confirming that she had been COVID-19 positive. The deceased was a resident in the area of Kesilvatta in Colombo and suffered from diabetes. Her last rites were performed at the Borella Public Cemetery this afternoon. She became the 20th person to succumb to COVID-19 in Sri Lanka. The last 7 coronavirus-related deaths were reported within a span of just 10 days. Meanwhile, speaking to First at 9 Director of the Medical Research Institute, Dr. Jairuwan Bandara said that random testing will continue in order to assist the speedy detection of COVID-19 cases across the country.
Ministry of Health has implemented many criteria and many activities to find out new cases in the society. So one parameter is to look for random sampling in each and every places where we suspect COVID infection. So it is very important and still we are continuing and we have not stopped random sampling in this country. That is most important because we are doing random sampling to detect cases everywhere if it is spreaded. So that is very important and we are continuing that.
In the meantime, 633 COVID-19 infections were identified in the country yesterday. Of these, 495 are associates of previously identified infected persons and the remaining 138 are from quarantine centres. From the 633 infections identified yesterday, 264 are identified from the Gampaha district, 162 from the Colombo district, 18 from the Kalutara district and 17 from the Kurunegala district. Further, 11 infections were reported from the Kegol district, 5 from the district of Ratnapura, 4 from Gaul, while 3 each were recorded from the districts of Kandy and Matale, with 2 being confirmed from Ampara. Meanwhile, 1 infection each was confirmed from Matara, Hambantota and Badula districts. As of yesterday, 26 days after the outbreak at the Minuangoda apparel factory, COVID-19 cases are reported in all the districts of the country except in Kilinochchi. Among them, Gampaha and Colombo districts account for the highest number of cases. The districts of Kalutara, Kurunagala, Putlam, Gaul, Kegol, Kandy, Ratnapura and Anuradhapura are also showing a rapid increase in the number of infected persons. In the meantime, PCR tests conducted in relation to the Beruvala Fisheries Harbour last Thursday led to 30 people being confirmed with COVID-19. One of them had ventured out to sea for fishing before his PCR test result had returned. However, measures were taken to bring him back ashore. In Vattala, 75 people from its MOH division tested positive for the virus and steps were taken to refer them to treatment centres. Majority of those infections are employees of a private factory in Keravalapitiya, and as such, the factory in question was temporarily closed. Around 1,000 persons are employed at the said factory. Elsewhere in Horana, an employee of a prominent apparel factory was confirmed with COVID-19. A resident of Bulat Singhala, she had tested positive for the virus following random PCR tests conducted on 20 employees of the same factory, which employs around 6,000 people. The factory, however, was temporarily closed later. Meanwhile, the public health inspector in charge of Dompe today confirmed that 2 employees of a garment factory in the area were infected with the coronavirus. Their diagnosis was made following voluntary PCR tests. Accordingly, the garment factory, which provides a living to around 1,900 people, was temporarily closed, while associates of the infected were referred for PCR tests. In Bulat Kohupitiya, 11 persons have tested positive for the virus after PCR tests were performed on 30 people. 7 of them are fishmongers and the other 4 are associates of a previously infected fishmonger. In the meantime, 6 COVID-19 infected persons associated with the Paliagoda Fish Market cluster were identified from the Sitavaka Urban Council jurisdiction in Avisavella. They are residents of Puakpitiya, Galapitamada and Avisavella. Meanwhile, 15 cases of infection were reported from the Hangwalla MOH division and 6 of them are associates of the Paliagoda cluster. The remaining 9 are residents of Miriswatta, Aswatta, Hingurala and Vagavatta. In a separate case, a final year student of the University of Sri Javardhanapura residing in the area of Udadeltota in Kandy has contracted the virus. The student had last visited the university on the 5th of October and had taken medicines from several hospitals due to health complications. She was diagnosed with the virus following a PCR test conducted on the 23rd. A relative of the infected student who had come into direct contact with her was also diagnosed with the virus. In Borala, 7 police officers from the area tested positive for the virus after PCR tests were conducted on 13 police officers. In addition, an officer of the Foreshore Police and 2 officers of the Colombo Crimes Division were also diagnosed with the virus yesterday. With that, the number of COVID-19 infected police officers has risen to 78.
As at 4 o'clock today, from the 4th of October to date, 78 police officers have been found as COVID positive cases, and in addition to that, approximately 300 police officers have been sent to quarantine centers and 2,000 police officers have been instructed to be at their barracks and respective camps to follow self-quarantine procedures. However, a special mechanism is being implemented in the police organization in order to prevent spreading of COVID-19, and we have arranged and prepared special standby teams to deal with the issue. However, the service rendered by the police is continued with new officers. We have additional strengths in order to deploy at police stations to deal with day-to-day police duties and services.
In another development, a fishmonger residing in the area of Kahapola in Piliandala says that he has not been referred for treatment despite being diagnosed with COVID-19 4 days ago. His residence is surrounded by 3 other residences with 7 children and his infection was confirmed following a voluntary PCR test.
සෙන්තරාදුවේ ගිහලා පුතයි මායි දෙන්නම චෙක් කරා. 28 වෙනිදා උදේ 6 මාට විතර කෝල් එකක් ආවා පොසිටිව් කියලා. ඒක රැට ඒකෝ ගෙනියන්නේ. 29 වෙනිදා ආවේ 30 වෙනිදා බැලුවා. ඒ ආවේ ඉතින් මාස්ටර් කියන්නේ මම පාන්දර 2:00 ඇඳගෙන හිටියා බෑග් එකක් ලෑස්ති කරලා යන්න. කවුරුත් ආවේ නැහැ බලන්න. මේ ගෙදරත් ඉන්න ළමයි 3 දෙනෙක් උඩ ගෙදර 3 දෙනෙක් ඉන්නවා. අපේ ගෙදර දෙන්නෙක් ඉන්නවා පොඩි දෙන්නෙක්. කොහොමද තියාගෙන ඉන්නේ? මේක බෝවුන තහල බාල මිනිස්සුන්ට. ඒ මිනිස්සු හෙනෙILLයි වගේ. අපි මුකුත්ම නෙමෙයි කියන්නේ අපි අරන් ගිහලා බෙහෙතක් හේතක් කරන්න අරන් යන්න කියලා ඉස්පිතාලෙට. මම පිට එකට බෙහෙත් දුන්නා.
The Government Medical Officers Association in the meantime calls for additional power to be granted at district level to medical health officers so that containment action could be expedited.
ගම්පහ පළවෙනි රෝගියා මත වෙලා සමස්ත ගම්පහ දිස්ත්‍රික්කෙම වහන්න දවස් 20 ගණක් ගියා. දවස් 20 ගණන් ඒ ප්‍රමාදය අර සෝනල් ලොක්ඩවුන් එකට වෙච්ච දවස් ගානේ ප්‍රමාදයත් එක්ක තමයි මේ දිස්ත්‍රික්කයට මේක ව්‍යාප්ත කරන්න සමහර වෙලාවට අපිට සිද්ධ වෙන්නේ. දිස්ත්‍රික්ක මට්ටමට යම් බලතල ප්‍රමාණයක් දෙන්න, දිස්ත්‍රික් කමිටු වලට යම් බලතල ප්‍රමාණයක් දෙන්න, තමන්ගේ සෞඛ්‍ය වෛද්‍ය නිලධාරී කාර්යාලයේ රෝගියෙක් හම්බුනොත් මේ ප්‍රදේශ හුදකලා කිරීම ඇතුළු ඒ ක්‍රියාවලිය සම්බන්ධයෙන් යම් බලතල ප්‍රමාණයක් සෞඛ්‍ය වෛද්‍ය නිලධාරීවරුන්ට දෙන්න. ඔබ කොළඹදී PCR කරලා මාතර යන්න එපා. ඒතකොට ප්‍රතිඵල එනකොට ඔබ මාතර එහෙටත් රෝගිය ව්‍යාප්ත කළා.
In a separate development, the Government Medical Officers Association alleges that the Ministry of Health has failed to provide state hospitals with adequate facilities to conduct PCR tests in the backdrop of rising infections.
වසංගත රෝග විද්‍යාංශයේ පෙන්වලා දෙන විදිහට ලක්ෂයක්වත් මේ වෙලාවේ වෛරල් ට්‍රාන්ස්පෝර්ට් මීඩියම් එක අපි ගාව තියෙනවා. නමුත් මේ මොහොත වෙනකොටත් අපිට පේන දෙනවා 25000ක් විතර ප්‍රමාණයක් තමයි තියෙනවා කියලා කියන්නේ. ඒතර අපි දකිනවා මුල් ඒරියාව රෝහලේ මේ වෙනකොට PCR මැෂින් එක ක්‍රියාවිරහිත තත්ත්වයට පත් වෙලා. ඒ වගේම එම රෝහල තුලදීම යම් ආකාරයකට PCR පරීක්ෂණ 15000ක් පමණ කරන්න තිබිච්ච කට්ටල කල්ලිකුත් වෙලා තියෙනවා. සමහර පෞද්ගලික රෝහල් වල ඔවුන් දිනකට පරීක්ෂණ 1200ක් විතර කරනවා. ඒතර අපේ ආයතන 24ක් තුල අපිට බැරි වෙලා තියෙනවා 10000ක් කරගන්න. එතකොට ඒකට හේතුව මොකද්ද? ඒ වගේම කරාපිටිය රෝහලේ මේ ලබා දෙන සාම්පල් සංඛ්‍යාව කරගන්න අවශ්‍ය කරන යටිතල පහසුකම් නොලැබී යෑමේ ගැටලුවක් තියෙනවා. අපි හිතමු දවස් 5ක් පරක්කු නම් PCR පරීක්ෂණයක් ලැබෙන්න. ඒ කියන්නේ ඇත්තටම රටේ මීට දවස් 5කට පෙර පිටිපස්සෙන් ඉඳන් තමයි සමාලෝචනය කරමින් ඉන්නේ.
To date, 10,561 persons have tested positive for COVID-19 in Sri Lanka, with 6,142 persons still under treatment. 4,399 coronavirus patients in total have fully recovered from the virus since its first outbreak back in March.
The number of total COVID patients in this country is over 10,000. This is a remarkable indication. There is no information about a successful vaccination or a medication. So we have to adapt to live with this COVID-19 infection. No one can predict the future of this infection. So you have to keep that in your mind and use all the protective measures.
Safeguard hand sanitizer. නවතම නිෂ්පාදන පෙළ නිරෝගීමත් දිවියකට.
The current wave of COVID-19 is not the same as the one experienced in March this year and is far worse. A study by the University of Sri Jayawardhanapura has found that the strand of the virus infecting people at present can spread faster. What's more, once inside the body, it multiplies more aggressively and survives longer.
The unfettered novel coronavirus, which started spreading from the city of Wuhan in China late last year, grew into a global pandemic, leaving an entire world reeling. The coronavirus is a family of viruses that can infect both humans and animals, and the COVID-19 virus is caused by SARS-CoV-2. With the rapid spread of the virus in Sri Lanka, the Ministry of Health commissioned the University of Sri Jayawardhanapura to conduct research on the virus. Biological samples were obtained from infected persons island-wide for tests. The study revealed that the current COVID-19 wave is a variant strain with a higher rate of infectivity.
15 out of 16 strains had a D614G mutation, which is very well known to have a very high viral load as well as a high degree of transmissibility. So those are the two key findings in this sequencing. Compared to the previous clusters where we had the infection circulating in Sri Lanka with different lineages. For example, in March, April, May, we had the COVID-19 virus originating from B1, B2, B1.1, B4 lineages circulating in and around Sri Lanka, and different lineages were coexisting in a given particular time. But this time around, we have only one lineage spreading in different clusters, the same lineage. And the lineage we found this time is quite similar to the one circulating in Europe, especially Sweden and Denmark. So it has very high similarity to the one we have detected currently in Sri Lanka.
The police said today that all the people who disregarded instructions to stay within the Western Province after the curfew was imposed will be quarantined for 14 days wherever they might have travelled to. Though the curfew in the Western Province is set to be lifted on Monday, the government reminds the public that all areas which were under lockdown before the Western Province was brought under curfew will remain under lockdown until further notice.
The quarantine curfew that went into effect at midnight on Thursday, the 29th, will be lifted at 5 a.m. on Monday, the 2nd. The curfew, however, will be lifted in the Western Province, with all other areas which were previously under curfew remaining to be so. As such, 68 police areas that were under curfew prior to the imposition of curfew within the Western Province will remain under curfew until further notice. The police took measures to ensure that curfew regulations were adhered to during the Western Province lockdown. Meanwhile, police media spokesperson DIG Ajit Rohana says that a special operation is launched to identify persons who left the Western Province over the last 2 days after the curfew announcement was made.
As we mention constantly, a special operation is being conducted in the tourist destinations, especially in respect of the local tourists, in order to implement quarantine procedures for the families or the people who have left Western Province on the 29th and 30th. So accordingly, persons have been identified by the respective police divisions, and on the instructions of health authorities, they have been ordered to be quarantined at the places where they are staying at the moment. The places are hotels, circuit bungalows or other resorts. Especially these persons have been found in Patiklo, Nuwara, Tangol, Mathara, Jaffna and Bandarawala areas. We are implementing the operation in order to trace the persons who have violated the quarantine order issued by health authorities in restricting leaving Western Province and 5 police areas of Uliapitiya division.
In the meantime, he also elaborated on the use of curfew passes.
In addition to that, a special RTM has been issued by the police headquarters today in order to streamline the curfew permit procedure. The employees of government and statutory institutions are allowed to move and report for their duties with their official ID card. However, they should use this official ID card as the curfew permit for their duties if they are informed to report for duty.
Meanwhile, the PHIs of the Hatton-Dikkoya Municipal Council directed a group of persons who had come from the areas of Vallavatta and Mattakulya after being employed there. In another development, a few shops opened today in the town of Hatton, despite the area being placed under isolation since the 27th of this month. A liquor store too was seen doing sales illegally. A PHI from the Hatton-Dikkoya Municipal Council ordered the closure of the shops, saying that the shops were not allowed to open until the town is disinfected. Meanwhile, measures were taken to disinfect the buses and three-wheelers in the areas of Hatton. In Miriswat, the State Minister Kanchana Wijesekara engaged in an observational tour at the fisheries harbour today. Fishermen who did not adhere to stipulated health and safety protocols were warned by the State Minister.
We will see you once more on the other side of this break. Bear with us.
Ceylon Bank, the bank with a heart.
Welcome back. You're watching First at 9. Now, AdaDerana and Dialogue recently launched a program to distribute essential food items to people who are helpless due to the quarantine curfew imposed in some areas due to the spread of COVID-19. A convoy of vehicles carrying food items from the Ode temple in Maradana set off today with the hope of being a refuge for our stricken people. Meanwhile, AdaDerana and Dialogue also donated essential food items to the Freedom Home Care, which is a psychiatric rehabilitation unit in Kalaniya. AdaDerana will continue to carry out these special relief operations in collaboration with Dialogue. Former Governor of the Central Bank, State Minister of Money and Capital Markets and State Enterprise Reforms, Ajit Niwad Cabral, affirms that the country is more than capable of managing or maintaining, its debt service capacity. Giving reasons as to why there should not be any undue fears, Cabral expressed confidence Sri Lanka will return to high growth path that was seen prior to 2015, when annual growth rates of over 6.5% were a regular occurrence. State Minister of Money and Capital Markets and State Enterprise Reforms, Ajit Nimad Cabral, believes that the expansion of the fiscal deficit and the increase in debt levels in 2020 should not be generalised as a prolonged debt distress, but rather as a one-off deviation from the clear fiscal consolidation path that has been well articulated in the new government's policy framework. In a statement, Cabral says that decisive and bold action taken by the government, including the restriction of non-essential imports, along with the reduction in global petroleum prices, resulted in a substantial saving of nearly $3 billion in terms of expenditure on merchandise imports in the first 9 months of the year compared to the same period of the previous year. This saving, he says, along with the better-than-expected outcomes in terms of merchandise exports, services exports other than tourism and workers' remittances, is now projected to compress the external current account deficit to below 1.5% of GDP in 2020. The State Minister of Money and Capital Markets and State Enterprise Reforms goes on to note that growing business confidence due to decisive action by the government and the central bank has enabled the country to stabilise the exchange rate with only a marginal depreciation of around 1.5% so far this year, even while the central bank was able to purchase or absorb $300 million from the domestic foreign exchange market during the year. As a result, official reserves remain close to $6 billion after settling foreign debt service repayments of around $4 billion thus far during the year, including the repayment of the matured international sovereign bond of $1 billion in October this year. Further, the government authorities are presently negotiating a loan of $700 million from the China Development Bank, which is expected to be at an interest rate and terms of repayment that are significantly more favourable than the $1 billion sovereign bond that was just repaid. In addition, an attractive exchange rate risk-free forex swap facility has been introduced for many foreign investors who invest in Sri Lanka government securities, which is expected to boost foreign exchange inflows, particularly from the Middle East, in the period ahead. In terms of growth performance, Cabral says that Sri Lanka is once again set to embark on a growth path following the setback in the first half of 2020 caused by the pandemic. He expressed confidence that the expected revitalisation of state-owned enterprises, together with the private sector-led growth projects, would also revert the Sri Lankan economy to the high growth path that was observed prior to 2015, whereby annual growth rates of over 6.5% were regularly recorded. The statement also read that Sri Lanka's entire local debt stock of about $42 billion as at end of July 2020 is being rolled over and repriced now at interest rates which are almost half of what was paid in 2019, while the rupee remains stable. Cabral also notes that a new trend has been established where greater reliance is being placed on domestic financing, and that strategy has already improved the domestic to foreign ratio of debt from 51 to 49 at end of 2019 to 56 to 44 now. Therefore, he says that it is clear the government's commitment and support towards better debt management, both directly and indirectly, has already started to take effect. And that's it from all of us here at First at 9. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.